Don't see them.
Okay, let's start. Okay, today's breakfast is sponsored in honor of the birthday girls, Rivka Ryman and Hanier, and we're celebrating birthdays in the month of Tammuz. We've now finished, I think, the third cycle of the birthdays. I'll send out an email to people who are still interested in continuing with this, or if you have another suggestion to do something else, you can let me know. Also, the Shabbos lunch and learn, there wasn't enough interest in it. We'll bring it up again after the Chagim. I think the next time we have.
They open it to the entire shul.
Because I'm not a caterer.
Oh, okay.
I have to start,
Making more interesting.
I have to pick my ways of how to do things. First, I start with 15, 20 people. We see if it's successful, and then we move on to something bigger and better. But to start off with possibly 40, 50, 60 people on day one, that's, for me, it's a difficult thing. Yeah, that's Friday night, Friday night might even be better than Shabbos. I think November, again, we go to, I think that day, there's 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, so Friday night would be ideal. We'll see, we'll talk about it after the Chagim, give people enough time to plan the schedules, because also people sometimes plan out 4 to 8 weeks in advance of what their Shabbos schedules are. So there's not enough time to do it, and also people will have to walk, and people come from other places. Okay, so I think that's about it, and we can now start.
Okay, it's recording?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
On Friday, we discussed, I guess I might call it a very heavy topic in terms of why God causes wars to happen, even if it's to get people to daven more and learn more. It's a very heavy topic, but every once in a while, it's important to think deeply about things. Today's topic, I don't know if it's lighter or heavier, but it deals with a very important area of Jewish belief, Jewish life. We know that in halacha, there is a psak, there is a final ruling about how to behave in any particular situation. This is what you have to do, this is what you have to do if this happens, and there are piskei halacha. Sometimes they are very, very black and white, very, very clear. Sometimes there are gray areas, and sometimes you have to investigate a little deeper, perhaps ask questions as to find out what the correct approach is to any particular given situation. And that's why you have different poskim. And you have majority views, and you have minority views, and you have people that are selective in their views. What determines the halacha? We have a Shulchan Aruch, and even on the Shulchan Aruch, there are differences of opinions. You have the Shulchan Aruch itself, which is based on Sephardic practice mostly. The Ramah adds his notes as to what the practice is in the Ashkenazi communities, and then from there on, it just keeps on going. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. There's a geometric progression of poskim. So let's assume, for argument's sake, there is a particular question that comes up, whatever the question might be, and you have 10 poskim who say permissible, and you have 10 poskim that say it's prohibited. What do? So the simple answer is you ask your rabbi, he'll tell you what to do. But how does he decide? Now, no, what's that?
Who is his Rebbe?
Well, so he followed his Rebbe, and then his Rebbe, assuming that Rebbe is a person of stature, has to make a determination between the different poskim. And this is why it takes tremendous knowledge and ability and a breadth and a scope that very few people really have to be a real posek. It isn't simply enough just to know halachos, but you have to know how to put things together. To be a real posek, it requires not only encyclopedic knowledge that many gedolim have, And I have met some of these people, and it's truly amazing. Not only amazing, it's scary about how much people know and how much people can pick without having to look it up. Now, when you have 10 poskim on either side, so the question is, well, which posek do you rely on? Is it based simply on majority? Is it based on the individual's, how do you rank one posek versus another posek? And then you have Ashkenaz and Sfard, Hasidic, Misnat. Halacha is an area of where psika, and there are books written about how to paskin halacha for those that are gedolim. Another area that I want to talk about today, and not halacha, but the area of hashkafa. Hashkafa, loosely translated, is perspective, point of view. What is the correct Jewish hashkafa on certain topics? What is our point of view? What should we be believing, or what should we think about subject A, subject B? And what determines that belief? Is it personal? Or is it based on what some great rabbi may have indicated is the appropriate way to believe? Or is there some type of a consensus? As one person put it, is there a psak in matters of hashkafa? Do you have a clear black and white way of determining psak? I want to just play around with that topic a little bit this morning. The Gemara tells us in Eruvin that Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai argued for many, many years on many, many different topics. And people analyzed them in many different ways. Well, this one was more lenient, this one was more strict, this one represented the aristocracy, this one represented the common, whatever the background may have been to these machloksim. But they differed on so many basic fundamental areas of halacha, and each one claimed the halacha was on their side. And by the way, it's just as a parenthetical footnote, even though they argued bitterly about many, many important areas of halacha, how to make kiddush, there's a lot of very important areas, nevertheless, they were personally very friendly. People from Beis Hillel married people from Beis Shammai. I mean, they got along. You didn't have the acrimony that you have in some cases. They argued on halakhic grounds, but personally, they were very friendly. So they argued for many, many years. Finally, a bas kol comes down min hashamayim. A heavenly voice comes down and says the famous line, Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chayim. They're both right. Where does that leave us? But they're both right. And some say, well, Beis Shammai was really correct, but his position was a little bit more stringent, and therefore we'll follow Beis Hillel, who was more lenient, but Yemei HaMashiach will follow Beis Shammai. That's one interpretation. All right. The point is they were both right, and we still have to struggle in who to follow. This happens in Psak very often. Yeah.
What did they do during their lifetimes?
So, good. So during their lifetimes, the Beis Hillel followed Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai followed Beis Shammai. Yeah, the Talmidei Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, right. And there are still people generations later who were known as Shamuti, for example, that they were much more rigorous and strict in their interpretation, like Beis Shammai. And again, one of my most favorite machlokas is Hanukkah lights. Beis Shammai says we light them in descending order. We follow Beis Hillel in ascending order because Malin b'kodesh ve'ein moridim, which is a hashkafic analysis. Theoretically, we should elevate in areas of kedusha or sanctification. But historically, Beis Shammai was correct, because if you recall, we talked about Hanukkah. Hanukkah, for many, many reasons, was based on the Sukkot festival, which they couldn't observe properly during the rebellion. And when they did get to Beis HaMikdash, the first Hanukkah was celebrated like Sukkot, including not just Lulav and Esrog, which is mentioned in Josephus and the Gemara, but they also offered the sukkah sacrifices. Anybody who's a Baal Koreh will tell you, how are the sukkah sacrifices offered? Descending order. 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. So in descending order, and Beis Shammai says in the Gemara, Shabbos, Chafal Chavav days, why we write in descending order, Keneged Porei HaChag, to correspond to the sukkah sacrifices. If you don't know the history of Hanukkah, that makes no sense to you. He was correct, but we follow Beis Shammai. So that's a halach, but hashkafa is much more difficult to pin down. What to believe in certain areas. Another, just an example of derech, or an approach. In the Mishnah, when you study the Mishnah, you have the majority opinion and you have minority opinions. We always follow the Chachamim, or we always follow Rabbi, or different machloksim, but we know who to follow. Why are minority opinions mentioned in the Mishnah? If we want to learn halacha, give the halacha. Why quote the minority opinion? And the answer is that should there arise sometime in the future a bezdin, which won't happen until the Moshe Mashiach probably, should there be a bezdin, gadol b'chachma u'v'minyan, who is greater numerically and in scholarship than the Chachmei HaMishnah, then we can consider that minority opinion. Which, by the way, is an important area of psak, because very often when a posek is given a difficult question to deal with, he sometimes has to find that minority opinion to justify certain things, depending on what the situation might be. Whether it's a question of national political import or a person's family issues, sometimes you have to find that minority opinion but you have to be a great scholar and have very broad shoulders. All right. Yeah.
That may not be the only reason why you recorded it. The Shulchan Aruch is meant to record, or the Rambam meant to record the practice. The Gemara and the Mishnah are a didactic or a pedagogical method. So it's not meant to record the halacha, it's meant to record the development.
True. It's there to show the development, but it also gives you an option, should the need arise, to perhaps in some limited cases, and you need very broad shoulders, to utilize that minority opinion.
If you have broad shoulders, you can even come up with a reason that wasn't thought of at the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, determining, who is the psak to follow is a very elusive question, and that's why you have to, as I say, you have to have this encyclopedic knowledge. And it's staggering. If you read Rav Moshe Feinstein's Igros Moshe, if you read the Tshuvos of Avadia Yosef, if you look at some of the writings of Herschel Schachter, they have such insight. They pull people out of nowhere, out of thin air sometimes, to support a particular point of view. And not only do they know the point of view, but they're exactly where to find it. To give you one very, very small example. Everybody heard of the Rush. Everybody heard of the Balaturu. There's another brother, Rav Yaakov ben Harash. Nobody knows about him. Rav Yaakov ben Harash took over as the chief rabbi of Castile when the Rush died. Not the Balaturu, and he was blind. And he wrote a sefer of Tshuvos called Zichron Yehuda. The reason I know about it is I wrote a book about it. But other than that, most people never heard of Yehuda ben Harash. And certainly his Tshuvos. And I came across an article by Rav Schachter where he quotes a Tshuva of Zichron Yehuda. I have never seen any other posek quote Zichron Yehuda, ever. My knowledge is not encyclopedic, but that just gives you an idea that everything he touches, he remembers. All right, moving on. Hashkafa is much more difficult because you can't pin it down. How do you believe? How do you, again, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai argued in terms of, is it better for man to have been born or not been born? Interesting question. Given the challenges of life, given the mitzvos losas, should, and that machlokas went on for years. Ultimately, they decided better off man shouldn't have been born because there are so many challenges, whatever. But these are philosophic, hashkafic questions that it's very hard to put a psaka. What should people be studying? Halacha, Kabbalah, Musar, Chasidus. If you have X number of hours available in the day, what should you be studying? And by the way, this machlokas during time of the Rishonim. During the Renaissance period, when people began writing about areas other than halacha, great rabbanim were engaged in philosophy and in poetry. This is a waste of time. And generally speaking, Jewish philosophy is not studied in yeshivos. It's not. There was, who was it? If Yaakov Emden went so far as to say that the Rambam, who wrote Mishnah Torah, Perush Mishnayos, and Chuvos, and so forth, was not the person who wrote Moreh Nevuchim. Someone else, same name. Couldn't have been. It's an approach. It's an approach. What is the correct approach? What should we spend our time doing? Should we read? And this played out in the Eastern Europe. There were Litvish yeshivos who just studied halacha, halacha, halacha. And there were the Musar yeshivos that worked on Musar and worked on the perfection of a person's innate abilities and how to behave and how to be a better person, which took away time from Gemara. What's the halacha of hashkafa? At the end of davening, if you look in your siddur, almost every siddur at the end of davening has the Rambam's Ani Mamins. Ani Mamin be'emuna shalema, and he lists 13 different basics of Jewish faith concerning God, his incorporeality, and the Mashiach, and so forth and so on. And by the way, they argued about Mashiach in the Gemara too. There are some who said Mashiach came already. He's not going to come again. We lost that opportunity during the time of Tanakh. We don't believe that. I mean, so normative Jewish belief is Mashiach will come. But that was the point of view expressed in the Gemara. God's incorporeality. God knows everything beforehand, before it even happens, which raises other questions. I mean, read the Ani Mamins. Coming of the Mashiach, God punishes those who violate mitzvot and rewards those who do mitzvot. God, what is it? Moshe is the greatest of all the prophets. All the Torah that we have today was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. All right? There's no other Torah. It can't be exchanged. God knows everything before it happens. Read it. It's in every siddur at the end of davening. The Rambam codified Jewish belief. What should a Jew believe? In earlier periods of history, it was much more philosophical in terms of Jewish beliefs. In later periods of Jewish history, there were serious machloksim. I mean, aside from Tzdukim and Perushim, which was a halachic dispute, there were many, many other groups that arose. In more modern times, the Hasidic movement, for example. The Hasidic movement took over most of Southern Europe after the Khmelnytsky uprising of 1646, 1648, and the entire Ukraine Jewish communities in southern Poland were wiped out because of Bogdan Khmelnytsky's uprising. There were no rabbis. There was nobody to lead the Jewish community. Northern Poland, Krakow, Lublin, you had yeshivos. Did the rabbis come down from north to the south to teach the people? They did not. They were aristocratic scholars, and they wouldn't have anything to do with the riffraff. Along comes Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, and he said, we need a vehicle for people to connect to Judaism through simcha, through hislavus, through energy and passion, and Hasidic movement was born. Emphasis was not on learning. It was connecting to God in other ways, because they had no learning or leadership there from a rabbinic perspective, right? So as the movement grew, question was, can you be a chassid? Where you would suspend the amount of time you'd spend learning Torah and study the teachings of a Rebbe, or follow a Rebbe, or do certain practices that perhaps were anti-halachic, or not concerned about it. But one of the major problems today that still exists is the fact that Hasidim somehow are not concerned about the time for davening. Sof Zman Kriyas Shema, Sof Zman Tefillah. My grandson was someplace last Shabbos, and there was a Hasidic minyan where he was, and they wanted the normal davening time was 10 o'clock. So somebody tried to say, let's have a Hashkama minyan at 8:30. And they couldn't get enough people for it. And then I don't know if they barely made Zman Tefillah or not. But interesting, so hashkafically, can you be a chassid? If it involves being not mevatel, but not spending an emphasis on learning Torah. That was one big machlokus. And there are other machlokus earlier on concerning philosophy and poetry. Should you study philosophy? Are you allowed to study philosophy? There was a chayrim on studying philosophy. Because anything that takes away time from learning Torah is hashkafically not accepted. In modern times, the big hashkafic question is Zionism. What is the correct Jewish approach towards Zionism? Is it halachically acceptable to be a Zionist? Because the Gemara in Ksubos says that we have to wait till Mashiach comes. Mashiach comes, we'll all go back. Fine. On the other hand, there are others that would say, if we have an opportunity to come back to Eretz Yisrael, we should grab it and celebrate it. When Israel became a state in 1948, Rabbi Meshulam Roth, who was one of the members of the Bezdin in Yerushalayim, wrote a very famous tshuva in Kol Mavaser, showing halachically why it's an obligation to say Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut. That's a classic tshuva. And he quotes many Rishonim and Achronim to support his point of view. Now, Meshulam Roth, among those who know, I use that expression, was a bona fide scholar of Talmud Chacham, and his tshuvos are normatively accepted. But this was a radical departure, and the halakhic world was split in half, or perhaps split in thirds, I should say. Yes, say it, no, say it. With a bracha, without a bracha. Half Hallel, full Hallel. Because people died. And that machlokas is still going on. Fast forward to 1967. And I remember very clearly, a student of the Rav, when I asked him, and I was at that time, was a young person, and I asked him, what do we do? So he said, if you really believe, say Hallel with a bracha. That is not a halakhic response. If you really believe in the miracles that return to Israel, but that's a hashkafic response. So hashkafically, everybody says, of course you say Hallel. Halachically, the question is whether or not you say with a bracha or not a bracha. Normative practice among a large segment of yeshiva-trained people who are Zionistic will say Hallel, but without a bracha. In Bnei Akiva circles, they'll say Hallel with a bracha, and there's a machzor for Yom Ha'atzmaut. And the celebration begins the night before. Some people say Hallel the night before at Mariv as well. And there's a whole tekes. There's all kinds of adding things on. There's a Haftorah to be said. Od Hayom Benov, the last day of Pesach, that you say Yom Ha'atzmaut. You say Yontif Tzukei de Zimra. You know, if you ever daven in a Bnei Akiva Minyan Yom. This is hashkafa, but it's a hashkafa that impacts halacha. So my question is really unanswered. Is there a psak for hashkafa? On the one hand, no, because it's hashkafa, it's not halacha. But on the other hand, you rely on your rabbinic authorities to tell you what you should do as well as what you should believe. And that's a tricky area. What you should believe. And is there a normative? Now, if you have a Rebbe that you go to for everything, then you follow what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe says yes, you follow. Most people today, unfortunately, halacha is like a Chinese menu. One from column A and one from column B. Yes. True.
The only group that decided a lot of what the Paris says. They decided a year or two, whatever, how many years later, or by the time of Purim, that yes, the Shana Harris, Kavua, Palo, etc. Why is that not good enough to say when we have a corpus of Klal Yisrael deciding halacha, that's what we follow. We don't have a corpus from the Hakama Samadina. There's no one corpus that's deciding halacha. So we're trying to go against what was always considered the way halacha is made by saying it depends on your feeling. We're complicating it.
We are. And it's very complicated because since the Churban Beis Hamikdash, and in truth, 60 years before the Churban Beis Hamikdash, when Rome took over, we haven't had a Sanhedrin.
Yeah, you had Chacham in the time of Hanukkah, you had Anshe Knesset, you had a whole corpus that did halacha. That you did not have since the Middle Ages. You haven't had that.
That's correct. Which is why Isha Yashov Be'enov Yaseh, unfortunately, because we don't have a body to determine halacha for Klal. We have no pope. We have no body, a Sanhedrin, to tell us what to do or what to believe. And that's why everybody has their own Rebbe. And as you said, it's, I wouldn't call it anarchy, but it's pretty close to it. Because you can find support for almost any point of view. I mean, look, legitimate. I'm not talking about conservative reform, but you can find legitimate support among halakhic sources for almost any position. It takes a great gadol to be able to sift between them and tell you this is the correct approach.
That's when you're going to have a psak that's going to be binding on all of Christ, or whether to say hallel or not to say hallel. That'll be enforced.
Yeah, I agree.
The so-called anarchy is exactly what we had at the time of tomorrow. People that felt Brazil one way, people that felt they showed another way, all at the same time.
Okay, but it wasn't quite as simple as that. The individual areas where they differed were not major halakhic areas. The order in which they said Kiddush might have differed, but they all observe Shabbos. All right, they may have differed on individual pratim, but there was a Sanhedrin. Okay, okay, fine. But
All over the place.
just like today, the siren goes off in Yerushalayim. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, they blew shofar. They blew shofar 3 times at Erev Shabbos. They blew shofar to tell people to come in from the fields. Then they blew shofar to say, get ready. it's coming. And the third shofar says, it's now Shabbos. And that's it. You should be in shul. So right now, we have basics and we have details. We don't have anybody to tell us what the details should be definitively. That's what, until we have a Sanhedrin. Hey, Rav Yemeinu, Mashiach will come. There'll be which is why they've tried, I mean, unsuccessfully, to reestablish the Sanhedrin a few times. Didn't work. The Rambam came up with a novel idea based on his own. He has no sources for it, to reestablish the Sanhedrin, and it didn't go anywhere until 500 years later, where they tried to do it in Eretz Yisrael, and that also didn't work. When Israel became a state, they tried it again, and it didn't go anywhere. So we'll have to wait till Mashiach comes. But in terms of the psak, the same way that there is a broad spectrum of halakhically accepted practices, I use that in quotation mark, there's also a broad number of categories of, I guess, hashkafically accepted points of view. To say definitively, this is the point of view, depends on where you come from. If you are a Satmar Chassid, then you believe that the Zionist state of Israel should not exist, and you are vehemently anti-Zionist, to the point that the Six-Day War was considered the work of Satan. And I've had this discussion with a Satmar Chassid. And I went to the Satmar Rebbe's book and I said, this is not true. But the Rebbe said it. I have to believe the Rebbe. The Rebbe said it. Norman Lamb wrote a critique of this book called Ala Geula of Ala Tamura, which a Satmar Rebbe wrote in the aftermath of the Six-Day War, saying what a terrible thing it was. Demolished the book, but the Rebbe said it. So, and because we don't have a son, now, an interesting question will be, when Mashiach comes, will those people who have points of view contrary to what Mashiach will say, will they follow Mashiach? So there'll be a Sanhedrin to enforce. Because even though there'll be a Mashiach and there'll be a Sanhedrin, there will be diehards that say, but the Rebbe said, well, sorry, the Rebbe is not the final word. Now you have a Sanhedrin. But until we have a Sanhedrin, Rav Yemeinu, it should happen. Unfortunately, there is no psak in terms of hashkafa. And the same way you rely on your Rebbe or your Gedolim to tell you what the halacha is, you have to look to somebody who you accept as your halachic and hashkafic authority to also tell you what to believe. It isn't just how you feel. There are parameters, there are certain guidelines, and in that regard, the same way that there's a psak for halacha, there is a psak for hashkafa as well. If you hold that somebody is your Rebbe and he holds X, Y, and Z is the correct position, that's what you should do. If your Rebbe stands for Kriyas HaTorah, you should stand for Kriyas HaTorah. If your Rebbe waits 6 hours and not into the 5th hour, you wait 6 hours. If your Rebbe believes X, Y, and Z, you should believe, if he's your Rebbe. Trouble is, today, most of us don't have a Rebbe. We pick and choose. And that's a separate issue, and perhaps we may get into that some other time. But it's an interesting question. The same way there's a psak in halacha, there's probably a psak in hashkafa as well. Yeah.
It's an acceptable minhag, and you got to say,
Okay, so this question is discussed. This question is discussed in the Gemara and Poskim. If your Rebbe says one thing and your father says something else, so the answer that the Gemara tells us is that your father brings you into this world. Your Rebbe will bring you into the next world. It's a difficult answer. But it depends on the nature of the question. Now, if your Rebbe is a smart Rebbe, they'll tell you to follow your father.
It's only they're both legitimate.
Yeah, but
It's one thing, but they're both.
yeah, but so again, the Gemara does ask that question. Yes. Okay, so again, if the Rebbe is a smart Rebbe, he'll tell you to follow your father's mitzvah. I mean, these questions come up all the time. It's the same thing. A young man goes to Eretz Yisrael to learn for a year and decides he wants to make Aliyah, stay there or join the army or what have you. It happens all the time. And the parent says, you're coming home. And if you don't come home, you're on your own financially. Come home, we want you home. And the kid says, but I want to learn Torah, or I want to join the army. And this question has been raised many, many times. What do you do? And there are some poskim who say you follow your parents. Others that will say, stay in Eretz Yisrael. Depends who you ask. Difficult questions. That's why poskim need very broad shoulders to answer these questions. But and sometimes you have hashkafa and halacha colliding. Halacha says you follow your father. Hashkafa says, but we belong in Israel. Come join me. So that's why you need gedolim and broad shoulders. More questions than answers. But anyway, let it percolate. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Wally.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. They thought he was Mashiach too. They thought he was Mashiach. Yeah.
Giannis, where's your cap?
Okay. Who's benching?
What?
Yeah, no, your hat.
Oh, no, I'm at home. At home, I don't have.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay. Are we
Have
benching?
a good day.
Okay. Let's get the show in there. Rabbi Saini Varech. Shimurach Metav Yad Olah, B'Shus Kol B'Subin Kan, Varech Shechal Mishalo, Baruch Shechal Mishlo, Tzvachayinu, Who knows in Lech, B'Kol Basar Kiyel, Tivla Kol B'Chin Mozon Chol B'Riyosov Asher Bara, Baruch Ato Adonai Hazon Es HaKol. Baruch Ato Adonai al haaretz ve'al hamazon. Uvenei Yerushalayim er hakodesh meirav yameinu. Baruch Ato Adonai b'nei beracham of Yerushalayim. Amen. Mikol tu v'olam ha'yachasreinu.
Nice.
Happy birthday, ladies.
Thank you so much. I went, I didn't go this year. There were about 35 people. It's last year, so I don't really remember.
So tomorrow, we have next week to get the first dibs on.
Oh, yay.
Okay.
Oh, yay.
But, you know, but they'll come to like this app.
No.
Don't worry about it, don't worry about it. Jay and Claire, okay, and the Gottliebs, Barry and Michael, and us, Lady and Jonathan, Paul Reamer, so I organized the whole thing. I mean, I knew just about everybody.
Okay. So, because they. No. They're going to be fun, somebody.
I mean, I didn't understand why he was not gonna charge them. Who was this agreeing to this?
Because we're buying somebody's sponsor.
Uh-huh.
Because Pete's sponsor. But it was only up until like our regular group, it's like 15, 20 people. We just looked and said, well, you know, that we do lunch, whatever, we just come to Shiur and have lunch because it was Shabbos. It was a very off the cuff light thing.
Right, but I understand that anybody,
But then if you open it up,
yeah,
you know, people.
sure, everybody understood.
That's what he came to. And then
Right.
there are all questions of how do you warm it up? Where do you warm it up? What do you do? This one, it meant to put out, you know, for sponsorship. You should just tell them. No, but that's not.
They also did it Friday night, which is
Well, that's what he
easier.
said he's gonna think of.
It's
You know
much
what-
easier.
He said in November it comes out. That's why I switched it. So maybe it's better that you could just plate everything. You have a piece of chicken, a piece of canola,
That's exactly what they did.
talk about it. And you know what?
And they had a caterer.
I don't have to do that.
The sound
Listen,
up and
you do
everything
it.
went
You
down.
need to
Whoa.
pay extra money.
So if you're at a certain point,
Uh-huh.
And get the
we'll
food
we'll
and
be
do
safe.
it. That's not the point. They put it out.
But they charged.
We just
Right.
don't. And if it's part of NATEP, it's not the Shiur. And if the Shiur wants to have a baby boomer lunch, dinner,
But then
breakfast,
then
knock
I could
yourself
see,
out. Knock yourself out. Don't go on a caterer and do it.
no, then I could see them saying,
And then charge.
like, anybody can come to NATEP,
That's right, but they don't.
but they don't, right?
So in other words, if you're coming, if your kids are running around like a bunch of maniacs, why are you coming and not supporting us any other time? You're just coming because you're getting a free meal.
Yeah,
Well, that's
you got it.
disgusting. Well, then that's disgusting.
Right, I
Still,
agree.
Show up, say something, do something. And it isn't just people that are older than whatever.
In their old school, we had people coming every week, never paying membership,
Right.
coming down.
And
to the
eating
kids'
like if they
shop,
were, that they were
Going
hungry.
down.
An entire table.
Right,
So
going,
the
going
entire
down
family
before anybody else.
Right, and they came
And
from a
sitting
third
down.
world country. And then they took on.
And then taking full plates of
Right,
food.
that's right.
I remember
That's also
the
what we do.
shul I go to down south, they used to have nice kiddushim, and now they decided people make a meal out of it. So then now they cut back. I said, that's not right. Hey, if people eat, let them eat. Let's let them eat. They're like so cheap.
You gotta pay for it.
No, but get this,
Right.
the shul is cash rich. They now give
Yeah.
every month
Yeah.
to Eretz Yisrael. They
It's
pick it
not
up.
It's
You know why?
AIDS.
They can't, the membership is growing exponentially, but there's no place for them to buy properties. Chabad next door, from under them, water to last lot.
So
You
nice,
just have to
wow.
just
I just did it. I don't know
That's
whether
what
it's
Tina said.
donated or whatever. And he says, they were like, oh, they want them. So we came in and stuff, we took a look at the bear. The bagels were all, I don't know who touched them. Teacher changed the kids' diaper, and then picked up a bagel. She
Yeah.
wasn't using gloves
Yeah,
to
right.
either thing. So, you know,
All right. What are you up to today? So I'm going to the fruit store now, and then I'm going to teach Jody how to play mahjong.
oh, that's cool.
Because she's, you know, she had surgery.
Yes, you told me she's
So
going out of.
she's going out of her mind.
I don't blame her.
Yeah, all right, yes, you ready? Okay, thank you.